Now in our 26th year, a quarter century of service to the worldwide amateur radio community, we are This Week in Amateur Radio, your all amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. This is edition number 1369 with a release and air date of Saturday, May 24, 2025. Please take the program to your air following the Q-tone. Heard every week on the amateur radio bands all around the world, broadcast on low-power AM and FM stations all across the United States, and podcast on the Internet since 1993. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, the worldwide premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service of the air. Here are the stories for release around the earth as we come to air with edition number 1369, our post-Hamvention wrap-up special edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. Amateur radio spectrum is addressed in a U.S. House reconciliation bill. We'll have the details. The ARRL renews its defense of the 902 to 928 megahertz amateur radio band. We will have a wrap-up of the highlights of the 2025 Dayton Hamvention. The Radio Amateurs of Canada updates 3 members on phishing attempts and cybersecurity. AMSAT says that it was all volunteers that powered their exhibits at Hamvention. We will have the results of the spring season ARRL section manager elections. The Hurricane WatchNet celebrates 60 years of operation with a special event station. Another electronic supplier in the United States shuts its doors. Funds for broadcast engineering student scholarships are raised by auctioning off an old antenna. We will look at the proposed consolidation of the International Amateur Radio Union into a single entity. The ARRL seeks changes to entry-level licensing, and a strong pulsar punches signals into our galaxy. We will have the details coming up in this week's report. These headline stories will come to you in a moment, along with this week's special features. We'll visit with Bruce Page, KK5DO, and get an update from AMSAT and what's new with all those amateur satellites in orbit. Australia's own Ono Bench Shop, VK6FLAB, and Foundations of Amateur Radio will answer the question, how does your IARU member society represent itself? Our own amateur radio historian, Will Rogers, K5WLR, returns with another edition of A Century of Amateur Radio. This week, Will takes us around the Wayback Machine to the year 1920, where we find that the uneven, partly unpredictable nature of radio wave propagation continued to fascinate hams after the war. This week's episode is simply called Freaks. We'll stop by and visit with Bill Sailors, AJ8B, in the DX Corner, with all the latest news on DXpeditions, DX, upcoming radio sport contests, and a whole lot more. And that's all straight ahead as North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine and bulletin service, This Week in Amateur Radio, takes to the air right now. Reporting from chilly Naugatuck, Connecticut, where for the past week it feels more like early March than it does the unofficial start of summer, I'm Steve Sawyer, K1FRC.
And reporting from our news bureau in Salem, Ohio, this is Denny Haight, NZ8D.
And reporting from our bureau in Dallas, Texas, where it might not be summertime yet, but we're getting close to 100 degrees. I'm Tammy, KI5ODE.
And reporting from our news bureau in Rochester, New York, along the southern shore of Lake Ontario on this Memorial Day weekend, I'm Dave Wilson, WA2HOY.
And reporting this week from our news bureau in Cortlandville, New York, I'm Chris Perrine, KB2FAF.
And reporting from our news bureau in Knoxville, Tennessee, back fresh from the Dayton Hamvention, where it was great to see everybody, I'm Josh Marler, AA4WX.
Reporting live from the warm and humid Space Coast in Florida, I am Ed Johnson, W2PH.
And reporting from our news bureau just outside Albany, New York, in the Geek Cave studios, back from a long recovery after surgery, I'm Rich Lawrence, KB2MOB.
And reporting from our New York News Bureau, where there's been lots of rain, but at least our lawns look good, I'm Eric, Kilo Delta 2, Romeo Juliet X-Ray.
And reporting from our amateur radio station in the Catskill Mountains of upstate New York, where we're preparing to plant flags honoring veterans this Memorial Day with fellow members of our VFW post. I'm Don Hulick, K2ATJ.
We begin this week with late-breaking news. The ARRL reports that early Thursday morning, May 22, 2025, the United States House of Representatives passed a massive reconciliation bill that contains spectrum provisions relevant to amateur radio. Here with all the details on this late-breaking story, we go to John Ross, KD8IDJ at League Headquarters.
Within 2 years, not less than 600 megahertz must be identified from between 1.3 and 10 gigahertz for reallocation to commercial use for broadband services. The identified spectrum must be auctioned by the FCC for such services on an exclusive licensed basis as follows: not less than 200 megahertz within 3 years, that's mid-2028, and the remaining spectrum at least 400 megahertz within 6 years, that's mid-2031. Excluded from the spectrum that could be reallocated for these purposes is 3.1 to 3.45 gigahertz, which includes the temporary secondary amateur band at 3.300 to 3.45 gigahertz and 5.925 to 7.125 gigahertz. With regard to amateur spectrum, the bands that potentially could be subject to consideration for reallocation under this legislation are 13 centimeters, 2300 to 2310, and 2390 to 2450 megahertz, and 5 centimeters, 5650 to 5925 megahertz. At this time, a number of bands have been mentioned informally for consideration, none of which include amateur spectrum, but the bands under consideration could change, and ARRL will closely monitor the evolving situation. Additionally, some government operations may be required to consolidate in current amateur secondary spectrum that is already shared with those government users. In select instances, this might constrain amateur operations if such a consolidation occurs. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
It is to be emphasized that these provisions have been passed by the House, but key United States senators have not agreed to some aspects and have stated their intention to modify these provisions as the bill moves through Senate consideration. The stated goal for final enactment is by July 4th, 2025.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, in a recent filing encouraged the Federal Communications Commission to listen to industry stakeholders about the detrimental impacts that changes to the 902 to 928 megahertz band would have for current users. John Ross, KD8IDJ, starts off our coverage of the story.
The FCC is considering a petition by NextNav Incorporated, a licensee in the 900 MHz location and monitoring service, LMS, to reconfigure the 902-928 MHz band to obtain more spectrum for itself and replace the LMS with high-powered 5G cellular and related positioning, navigation, and timing (PNT) services that would supplement GPS. ARRL filed comments opposing NextNav's proposal in September of 2024. ARRL's latest filing was submitted on May 13, 2025 by the association's Washington Council in response to an inquiry initiated by the Commission to consider more broadly ways to improve and harden GPS. ARRL's response echoes concerns of many others and underscores the need to improve and harden the GPS system in a manner that doesn't impact radio amateurs and other users of the 902-928 MHz band. The band supports an extraordinary number of unlicensed consumer devices, such as consumers both inside and outside of the United States, with which radio amateurs coexist. You can read more and see the entire filing at arrl.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL strongly agrees with the many parties that point out in the record of this proceeding that, in working with its sister federal agencies on this issue, one of the Commission's primary goals should be to ensure that existing services already operating in the spectrum, such as in the crowded 902 through 928 MHz band, should not be disrupted by complementary PNT if equal or better means are available. Many billions of unlicensed devices are in use to provide hundreds of applications and functionalities to the American public, and the number of devices and the functionalities that they provide continue to grow. These devices coexist with amateur radio operations in the 902 through 928 MHz band, but they, as well as amateur radio operations, would be displaced if a 5G-like PNT service was authorized to use this spectrum. In the instant proceeding, the FCC addresses GPS concerns holistically that are also being addressed by multiple other federal government agencies under the direction of the President. ARRL emphasized the FCC's expertise and role in making the best use of the spectrum resource. We commend the Commission for initiating this proceeding to take a holistic approach to the problem and possible solutions thereto, rather than a piecemeal approach that might have led to systems that would unnecessarily use valuable spectrum with inferior results and take years longer to construct from scratch. The Commission is the civilian spectrum expert among the collection of agencies that are addressing this issue. We rely on the Commission to make clear the value of each megahertz of spectrum and the trade-offs in designating any particular band for the purpose of complementary P&T. ARRL's filing is intended to emphasize the public interest in protecting amateur and others' access to the 902 through 928 MHz band, and to highlight that other, less disruptive options are available for PNT. ARRL will continue to defend amateur access to this and other threatened amateur allocations.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
The Federal Communications Commission this week adopted new rules to block and remove Chinese government and other untrustworthy actors' ability to assert control over America's wireless equipment authorization process. The rules will ensure that the hundreds of equipment test labs and telecommunications certification bodies entities that test, review, and certify wireless electronic devices for importation, marketing, and sale in the U.S., do not have ownership interests that present national security risks, including the risk that they would do the bidding of a foreign adversary. The FCC requires all electronic devices that emit radio frequencies, including IoT devices, computers, fitness trackers, network gear, smartphones, and baby monitors, to be authorized for use in the U.S. RadTel, iRadio, Quancheng, Retevis, and TID Radio, among others, will be subject to this new regulation. Each year, private entities, known as test labs, and telecommunication certification bodies, test tens of thousands of these devices and certify that they comply with various FCC rules, respectively. Accreditation bodies assess the test labs for competency and impartiality. Telecommunication certification bodies, accreditation bodies, and some test labs must be recognized by the FCC to perform these functions in the agency's process. However, prior to these new rules, the agency's eligibility criteria has been based primarily on technical competence, not trustworthiness. While the agency has in recent years barred entities on the FCC's covered list from having their devices approved for use in the U.S. due to determinations that such devices pose national security risks, these new rules ensure that the accreditation and certification bodies and test labs are themselves not untrustworthy actors. The FCC has reviewed currently recognized labs and found that a number of labs potentially have deep ties to the Chinese Communist Party. These include entities that are connected to Chinese state-owned enterprises, involved in China's military-civil fusion apparatus through their apparent work with the CCP's People's Liberation Army, and even entities that are themselves Chinese state actors. These labs have tested thousands of devices bound for the U.S. market over the last several years. In addition to the covered list, the new rules rely on official security determinations that the U.S. government has made, including the Defense Department's list of Chinese military companies and Department of Commerce entity list. This is action by the Commission on May 22, 2025 by report and order and further notice of proposed rulemaking in FCC docket number 25-27.
The ARRL interacted with thousands of members at the 2025 Dayton Hamvention, held May 16th through the 18th in Xenia, Ohio. Here with a look at the highlights of this year's Hamvention is John Ross, KD8 IDJ, who files this special report from League headquarters.
There were many ARRL programs and services available to visitors to the ARR Expo area. The ARRO Youth Lounge was busy throughout the event, and the kids were loving it, according to Education and Learning Manager Steve Goodgame, K5ATA, who pointed out that young visitors were building code keys from 3D printed kits and testing them out by sending messages. Saturday's ARRO Youth Rally saw several dozen young people get engaged in a day of ham radio fun. The youth rally actually extended into Sunday with the kids contacting skydiver Carlos Ortiz, K9OL, as he parachuted to the ground with a handheld radio. A little later, they launched an APRS-equipped balloon, W1AW-11, on a hopefully round-world trip. It flew into Africa on Thursday afternoon after crossing the Atlantic Ocean. Meanwhile, back in Hamvention, the ARRO Collegiate Amateur Radio Program booth was a flurry of activity with young adult hams for the whole weekend. The ARRO lab tested more than 170 radios in the booth, including a handheld radio that fell some 14,000 feet, and yes, it was K9OL's. It not only survived the fall in working condition, but still passed the spectral purity test. The chance to visit with members was encouraging for ARRL Digital RF engineer John McCullough, W1DRF, saying it was nice to have one-on-one with members who don't normally have direct contact with the lab. ARRL-sponsored forums were popular, especially a new one. Salty Walt's Portable Antenna Forum saw a packed house. Salty Walt Hudson, K4OGO, also had long lines to visit with him and get a signed copy of his new ARRL book, Salty Walt's Portable Antenna Sketchbook. The book, which made its successful debut at Hamvention, shows examples of antennas that Salty Walt has created for his fun seaside operating session. Salty Walt has amassed a large following on YouTube, bringing viewers along on his adventures and sharing his down-to-earth approach to tinkering. What you saw in that forum, said Hudson, is where hams are at today. What I try to do is simplify things. Go out and try it, and do make mistakes. That's what my YouTube channel is all about. You can read and see more highlights at ARRL.org. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
ARRL VEC manager Maria Soma, AB1FM, was on hand to help members renew their licenses and to encourage ARRL VE teams to migrate to all the digital exam system offered by the exam tools. She noted that it streamlined the process for VEs because there's nothing to mail in after a session. Many members stopped in to see the ARRL ICOM Dream Station that one eligible member is going to win. The grand prize for the ARRL sweepstakes, an ICOM 7760, sat on display in a glass case at the booth.
The Radio Amateurs of Canada continues to receive reports from RAC members of phishing attempts by individuals purporting to be from Radio Amateurs of Canada who are forwarding a message on their behalf. The latest reports use subjects and messages involving moving to a new secure email platform, final minutes, and announcements, among others. Previous reports also included gift cards for donation to veterans at hospice and palliative care units, and most of the messages have the names of RAC officials, many of whom are from recent and the distant past. Phishing attacks come from scammers disguised as trustworthy sources and can facilitate access to all kinds of sensitive material. Phishing attempts use publicly available information to fake legitimacy, and in some cases they use the names and contact information of RAC officials to gain your trust. They then provide instructions, such as asking recipients to save and open an attachment and then sign in using their own email address. Please do not follow these instructions. One way to recognize that this is a phishing attempt is to look at the email address that's being sent from, and you'll see it's not an RAC email address. Remember, Radio Amateurs of Canada will never ask you to provide a login or a password in email communication. To date, there's been no direct successful attacks on the RAC computer system. Unfortunately, attempts to defraud people through email messages and phone calls are part of the world we live in today. We'll continue to take measures to ensure our computer system is as safe as possible and that our members are provided with information. Radio Amateurs of Canada is continuing to increase their cybersecurity. They don't keep any financial information, and only widely available personal information such as name, call sign, and dates relating to current membership is available in their system, so their risks are considerably less than compared to a commercial system. Radio Amateurs of Canada only collects personally identifiable information about you when you voluntarily provide it, and when you provide for membership and subscription services, or provide your personal contact info for publication or product orders. Every effort will be made to ensure the information provided will be securely maintained. For more information, see their privacy policy and cybersecurity webpage. They continue to stay abreast of any changes in cyber threats and their response. They're also planning to make available to members the use of security systems you may already be aware of in other systems, such as providing for the use of complex passwords, as well as two-factor authentication to log in. Radio Amateurs of Canada will never ask people to download files from a third-party site in their email communications. Always check to see if the sender of a suspicious email has a rac.ca email address, as all RAC officials use rac.ca. If you're concerned or suspicious, always contact the RAC office before opening any files in an email message that appears to be from Radio Amateurs of Canada.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
AMSAT volunteers kept busy at the organization's exhibit at the 2025 Dayton Hamvention. Interest level was high among both satellite veterans and hams just wanting information on how to get started on the satellites. The hot seller at the exhibit was the brand new, updated edition of the book Getting Started in Amateur Satellites. The AMSAT education area attracted the attention of a number of young hams and soon-to-be hams. Karsten Glassbrenner, KQ4SJM, son of AMSAT Vice President Operations Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, shared his knowledge with other young people who came to the exhibit. Interest was also high at the AMSAT engineering area, where members of the engineering team discussed the Golf T and Fox Plus satellites currently under construction. Live satellite demonstrations outside of the exhibit area also drew interest from Hamvention participants. The Hamvention AMSAT Forum was held on Saturday afternoon, May 17th. The forum featured updates on the organization itself from AMSAT President Robert Bankston, KE4AL, Executive VP Paul Stetzer, N8HM, and from Frank Karnauskas, N1UW, Vice President of Development. Frank also updated those in attendance on the AMSAT Youth Initiative, including the Satellites in Space Help Us Live a Better Life on Earth online courses. Jerry Buxton, N0JY, Vice President of Engineering, provided an overview of upcoming satellite projects and launches in development, and Drew Glassbrenner, KO4MA, VP of Operations, discussed efforts to extend the lives of satellites already in orbit. Prior to the beginning of the Hamvention, on Thursday evening, May 15th, AMSAT members and friends gathered at Tickets Pub and Eatery in nearby Fairborn, Ohio, for what has become a traditional gathering in recent years. More than 40 were in attendance, a record number for this event.
ARRL members in Utah have elected Brett Pruitt, K7BDP of Hurricane, to continue as the ARRL Utah Section Manager, and his new term of office starts on July 1st. Pruitt received 275 votes, and Bob Craven, N7GTE, received 234 votes. Election ballots were counted on Tuesday, May 20th at ARRL headquarters. Pruitt was first appointed as section manager of the ARRL Utah section on February 1st, after previous section manager Pat Milan, N7PAT, resigned from the role in late January for health reasons. Nevada will have a new section manager as of July 1st, 2025. Craig McVeigh, N0CSM of Pahrump, was the only nominee to run for the new term of office when nominations closed on March 6th. John Bigley, N7UR, the current Nevada section manager, decided not to run for a new term of office after serving as section manager for the past 10 years. The following incumbent section managers were unopposed after the spring season nomination deadline, and they have been declared re-elected. They will begin new 2-year terms of office on July 1st, 2025. Chris Van Winkle, AB3WG in the Maryland and D.C. section, Nomar Vizcarrondo, NP4H in northern New Jersey, Nancy Austin, KC1NEK in Rhode Island, Stephen Hendricks, KK6JTB in the San Joaquin Valley section, and David Overton, W5JDO in West Texas. The New Hampshire section manager position will be resolicited in October QST for an 18-month term of office starting on January 1st, 2026.
In September of 1965, Hurricane Betsy hit Florida, the Bahamas, and the central United States Gulf Coast. The damage was nearly $1.42 billion, earning the storm the nickname Billion Dollar Betsy. Forecasting for storms like Betsy was still in its infancy. Here with a quick look at the history of and the Hurricane WatchNet Special Event Station is our very own John Ross, KD8 IDJ.
Bobby Graves, KB5HAV, the current Hurricane WatchNet manager, shared that amateur radio operator Gerald E. Jerry Murphy, K8YUW, then 28 years old, was stationed at the U.S. Naval Mobile Construction Battalion Center in Davisville, Rhode Island. During his time off, he handled countless phone passages and messages to and from military deployed personnel as a member of the Intercontinental Amateur Radio Net, IARN, on 14.320 megahertz. The public was becoming concerned, said Graves. In 1965, there wasn't any access to 24-hour news and weather reports. Murphy suggested to the IARN net manager to move those interested in the storm up 5 kilohertz to get them off the net, and the net manager agreed. Marcy Rice, KZ5MM, located in the Canal Zone, Panama, followed Murphy, and together they established the first Hurricane WatchNet on 14.325 megahertz. Murphy passed away in March of 2025. Now, the HWN will host a 2-day on-air special event to celebrate its 60th anniversary on June 7th through the 8th, 2025. Net control stations located across the United States will all operate using the call sign WX5HWN on or near 14.325 megahertz and 7.268 megahertz at the following times. Saturday, June 7th, 10 a.m. to 10 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time, and Sunday, June 8th to 10 a.m. for 5 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. And a note here that operations on 7.268 megahertz will conclude at 3 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time. A special commemorative certificate will be available by sending an email request to WX5HWN@hwn.org no later than June 30th, 2025. I'm John Ross, KD8IDJ.
This special event has been scheduled for the early days of the Atlantic hurricane season, which runs from June 1st through November 30th. While the season typically peaks from mid-August to late October, tropical cyclones can form at any time. For more details about this event and the Hurricane WatchNet, please visit www.hwn.org.
It's not just broadcasters who are getting their say in the FCC's Delete, Delete, Delete deregulation initiative. The National Association for Amateur Radio has also filed comments advocating for modernization of Part 97, the Amateur Radio Service Regulations. Their proposals include both previously submitted items and new requests that the ARRL said is centered on updating the rules to reflect technological advancements while preserving the foundations of traditional amateur radio practices. The soldering iron and discrete physical components used in past experiments often are replaced by a personal computer and a coding knowledge to experiment with new techniques and functions, the ARRL wrote. The ARRL said that while digital technologies like FT8, RTTY, and PSK31 have become integral to the amateur radio service, entry-level technician class license privileges have not been updated accordingly. It advocates for granting technicians access to HF frequencies where digital modes are prevalent, which it says is crucial for introducing newcomers to the fundamentals of low-power communication and fostering self-training and emergency communication skills. The youth attracted to amateur radio today will become the wireless engineers and space scientists of tomorrow that are critical to our nation's future if given a chance, the ARRL wrote. The ARRL references a February 2018 petition on this matter that has yet to see any action. Their specific requests include phone privileges in the 3.9 to 4 MHz range, the 7.225 to 7.3 MHz range, and the 21.350 to 21.450 MHz bands, as well as RTTY and digital privileges within current technician allocations on the 80, 40, and 15-meter bands. The ARRL also noted that increasing use of digital modes is leading to an imbalance within the 80 and 75-meter amateur bands. To improve spectrum efficiency and better accommodate the demand for digital modes, the association refers to their 2016 petition requesting adjustments to the subband boundaries. Specifically, it proposed shifting the lower edge of the phone band upward to 3.65 MHz, allowing RTTY data in the 3.5 to 3.65 MHz range, aligning the ACDS subband with international practices at 3.6 to 3.615 MHz, and granting novice and technician licensees CW, RTTY, and data privileges in the 3.6 to 3.65 MHz segment, with general and advanced licensees also gaining access to this segment. The ARRL reiterated its support for the FCC's ongoing further notice of proposed rulemaking that Radio World reported on in 2023 to eliminate baud rate and bandwidth limitations on specific amateur LF and VHF and UHF bands. It noted the widespread support for this change among commenters. Additional areas of interest in the ARRL filing include deleting obsolete digital code limitations. It proposes allowing amateurs to freely experiment with new, publicly documented, and decodable digital codes. Deleting amplifier drive limitations. The ARRL requests the removal of the 15 dB gain limit for HF amplifiers. It argues this rule, originally intended to prevent CB misuse, is now obsolete due to advancements in solid-state amplifier technology and restricts efficiency for U.S. amateurs. Deleting obsolete identification requirements for special call signs. The ARRL seeks to remove the requirement for operators using special event call signs to identify hourly with their assigned call sign. Implementing World Radio Conference 03 third-party rule changes. The ARRL calls for aligning FCC rules with the 2003 World Radio Telecommunication Conference updates regarding third-party communication. The association points out that despite the international agreement removing the need for bilateral treaties for most third-party communications, the FCC still requires such agreements, hindering cross-border communication and emergency training. Summing up, the league says the technology has changed dramatically in the amateur radio domain, as it has in most other communication services, and the above requested rules deletions and modifications will foster the regulatory goals for the amateur service and continue to increase the amateur's historical experimentation and service in meaningful ways, the ARRL concluded.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Hello and welcome to the DX Corner for your weekly dose of DX as part of Ham Radio's oldest ham radio magazine on the air, This Week in Amateur Radio. I'm Bill, AJB. If you're watching this on YouTube, the text of this will be included in the show notes. You won't have to remember calls, dates, URLs, or other details. You can just check the show notes. Last weekend was Hamvention weekend. From a DX standpoint, it was a great weekend. We had nearly 400 DXers attend the DX dinner on Friday night. There were 3 highlights of the dinner in addition to the DX dinner keynote speaker, Hal, W8HC. The first was the announcement of the DXpeditioner of the Year award. Here's a summary of the announcement. Quote, many times the Southwest Ohio DX Association has used the DX dinner as a vehicle to honor those who have gone above and beyond the norm to positively affect the DX community. We chose tonight's dinner to bestow one of those awards. The winning DXpeditioner logged 61,201 QSOs with approximately 15,000 being unique. This entity was number 8 before the DXpedition and currently sits at number 35. The Southwest Ohio DX Association is proud to announce that the 2025 DXpedition of the Year award goes to Marek FH4 VVK, who operated Fox Tango 4 Golf Lima on Glorioso Island. We congratulate Marek for a well-organized and executed DXpedition in a very challenging environment, end quote. And boy, he really deserved it and got a great round of applause from the nearly 400 in the audience. The second highlight was the announcement of the DXpedition of the Year. This is the most sought-after award in the DXpedition community. Here's a summary of that announcement. Quote, each year at the DX Dinner, the Southwest Ohio DX Association presents the DXpedition of the Year award. Our goal is to recognize excellence in the DXpedition planning and execution from most wanted entities. DXpeditions that were completed between March 24th through February 2025 are eligible for this year's award. It was a very difficult decision filled with several outstanding candidates. The winning DXpedition logged 106,902 QSOs, with 21,298 of them being unique. This entity was number 22 before the DXpedition and currently sits at number 45. The Southwest Ohio DX Association is proud to announce that the 2025 DXpedition of the Year award goes to November 5 Juliet, Jarvis Island. We congratulate the team on a well-organized and executed DXpedition in a very challenging environment, end quote. And that announcement brought rounds of applause and even a number of folks standing up for him. And they did a great job. Well, the third announcement I thought was really terrific. If you've been chasing DX for more than a few years, you know that there is a solar cycle that controls propagation. We're just past the peak and starting down towards the valley. In order to encourage DXpeditioners to head to top 20 destinations while conditions are still good over the next couple years, the Northern California DX Foundation, NCDXF, made the following announcement. Quote, make DX happen, $50,000 US to top 20 incentive DXpeditions. To encourage the activation of a top 20 entity listed on the Club Log DXCC Most Wanted list, the NCDXF is offering a cash incentive for DXpeditions taking place on or after July 1st, 2025 that meets the following conditions. Number 1, get permission and a license to operate from a top 20 DXCC entity according to the Club Log DXCC Most Wanted list on the date that the DXpedition operation begins. Number 2, securing permission to operate and a license for the DXpedition operation must not violate any law or regulation. Number 3, the ARRL's DXCC desk must approve the DXpedition for DXCC credit. Number 4, the DXpedition must have qualified for funding by the NCDXF. Note, this award is above and beyond any NCDXF funding that had been awarded for the DXpedition. 5, the DXpedition must log over 50,000 QSOs. And finally, number 6, within 90 days of the completion of a DXpedition to an entity described above, an application for the award must be submitted to the NCDXF with all required documentation. The application form for this award will be posted on the ncdxf.org website. The NCDXF Board of Directors will decide on making an award at its next meeting after receiving the application and all required documentation. All applications submitted will be maintained in confidence by the NCDXF Board. I mean, this is a terrific gesture and a great use of the money, and I'm so pleased to be a member of NCDXF and see them trying to encourage and support DXpeditions. So it was a well-received announcement. Okay, on to our DX. Each week I try to focus on those entities that will be available in the next 7 days. There's so much data to sift through that I thought a focus on the next week might be helpful. Here's what you should find QRV when you tune the bands. The following DX information comes from Bernie, W3UR, editor of the Daily DX, the Weekly DX, and the How's DX column in QST. If you would like a free 2-week trial of the Daily DX, your only source of real-time DX information, just drop me a note at thedxmentor@gmail.com and I'll take care of it. A team from India will be operating from Agadi Lakshadweep Islands as VU7 Tango from May 22nd to the 28th, including travel dates, and the CQ Worldwide WPX CW contest. They plan to be active on all HF bands using simple vertical antennas near the shore. This will be the first time for VU-7 to use QO-100 satellite. The team did not receive the required permissions until recently, so they're keeping this operation very straightforward. Plans include setting up 2 HF stations, subject to final travel and baggage confirmations. The team will collaborate with local operator VU-3 Fox Bravo Fahad. The equipment includes an IC705 and Juma 1000 capable of up to 400 watts, as well as an IC705 and a 10-watt transverter with a 60-centimeter dish. Operations will mainly be on CW on HF and satellite, single sideband on HF and satellite when not in the contest, and FT8 only on satellite outside of the CQ-WPX CW contest. All QSOs will be uploaded free of charge to LOTW and Clublog. For paper confirmations, Clublog's OQRS will be used, with QSLs expected to be printed in mid-July. Morton LA9GY will be operating in northwestern Eswatini as 3 Delta Alpha Zero Golf Yankee from May 22nd to June 2nd. He will use an IC705, a small amplifier, and a DX Commander vertical antenna. His primary focus will be on the 10, 15, and 20 meter bands. Expect to hear him mostly on CW, although he plans to do some sideband. He aims to respond promptly to direct QSL requests with SAEs. Sending letters from Norway is costly, amounting to about $4 per letter. Kilo Hotel 8-K0NR and Kilo Hotel 8-K0JJW will be QRV from American Samoa May 27th to June 9th. The primary objective is doing some summits on the air work. Planned is 20 through 10 meter sideband, FT8 and F4 with 10 watts to a wire antenna. QSL through LOTW only. They are open to SCADs on 6 and 2 any mode, and you can email that DXpedition at kh8@k0nr.com. Frank, Papa Hotel 2 Mike, is QRV as PJ4M from Bonaire until May 29th, mostly FT8 and some single sideband 80 through 10 meters. 6 meters is also a possibility. And you can QSL to his home QTH or use Clublog or LOTW. IK1TTD Gianni Benini is heading on another, quote, holiday expedition to Madagascar as 5 Radio 8 Tango Delta from May 27th to June 11th. He will be QRV from 2 locations. Plans are to use an IC706 Mark II-G with a vertical and end-fed half-wave. He will be on 40 through 10 meters, mostly on 20 meters. To mark the 2025 Giro d'Italia, the 108th 3-week Grand Touring Cycle Stage Race, which began in Albania, Special Event Station Zulu Alpha 25 GIA is QRV from Albania. The 3-week event will end in Rome. The ZA25 GIA call sign will be active until May 31st. They will be on CW, sideband, and digital modes on 160 through 2 meters, so another special event station.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
After his holiday-style operation as Fox Yankee Stroke Delta Lima 4 Echo Alpha from French Guiana, DL4EA Antonio will be in Suriname as PZ5EA from May 22nd to the 26th. Look for him on QO100 and some QRP on the HF bands. Fox 6 Bravo Charlie Whiskey Didier will be operating from Tikahu Island, French Polynesia, under the call sign of Tango X-Ray 5 United from May 26th to June 8th. His primary focus will be on contacts with Europe while also working other continents. His activity will span 40 to 6 meters using CW and sideband only. QSL information includes F6EXV via OQRS and Clublog and LOTW after 6 months. Anne, OH2YO, and Marco, OH2LGW, will be QRV from Kosovo May 20th to the 30th using CW, sideband, and FT8 on 6 meters through 160. And you can QSL that to Anne, OH2YO. With call sign OH0ERF, a group will be on from Acaro in the Aland Islands May 22nd to the 27th. The team plans sideband CW and FT8 on 40, 20, 15, 10, 6, and 2 meters, plus 70 centimeters and the QO100 satellite that mostly covers Europe and Asia and Africa. QSL via DK0 ERF or use LOTW and Club Log. Tango 88 Delta Zulu, Tango 88 HF, and Tango 88 Sugar George will be QRV May 22nd to June 1st from Palau on various bands using various modes. And that's all the details I have on Palau, but that's always a good one to get in the log if you can do it. We have a group from India activating Amala Island, India, May 28th to the 31st with the call sign AU2 Mike. They will be active on 40 through 6 meters with 3 stations, 2 beams, and 2 verticals. They also plan to be on the QO100 satellite. They plan to share propagation analysis information. As with their past expeditions, they seek financial support and have established a U.S. PayPal account, significantly reducing overhead charges. More broadly, VU2RS, Sarath, and his fellow de-expeditioners, quote, aim to activate all IOTAs in India before the sunspot activity decreases, providing opportunities for DXers and IOTA chasers worldwide, end quote. So good for you, Sarath. And he will be on an upcoming DX Mentor podcast. He's a very, very interesting gentleman and amazingly accomplished. So try to give that a listen. Speaking of that, the most recent DX Mentor YouTube episode is available this weekend. Jim, WP2RAM, was the guest. Jim discussed the upcoming de-expedition to the Faroe Islands the first week of June, as well as some of his exploits, some dangerous and some fun. Check it out. He's a good guy. If you're interested in DX podcasts and YouTube channels, you should check out the DX Mentor Facebook page and subscribe to be kept up to date on all of our DX activities. So finally, we have a contest update, and it's the same one that I had last week, and I'm going to do it again next week because I think this contest is a blast. And if you want to get your CW skills better and you want to work a lot of DX, this is the place to do it. I know that the ARL contest sheet is read elsewhere in this podcast, and the contests that I mentioned are sometimes redundant. However, there are a few contests that I have found to be especially useful for DXers who are trying to fill band slots or to get entities or zones in a log that may otherwise be difficult to get. As I have mentioned, the contest to get ready for is the 2025 CQ Worldwide WPX contest this coming weekend, the 24th and 25th. The objective is for amateurs worldwide to contact as many other amateurs worldwide and their prefixes as possible during the contest period. Only 160, 80, 40, 20, 15, and 10 meters may be used. Observance of established band plans is strongly encouraged. The exchange is RST plus a progressive contact serial number starting with 001 for the first contact. The final score is the result of the total QSO points multiplied by the number of different prefixes worked. With a call like AJ8B, you can see why I like this contest. I've always considered this to be the end of the contest season for me, so I like to hit it really hard. Let me know if you are planning to operate this and then how you do, because I'll let everybody know. Please send me an email if you need details on this or anything else we talked about. And I know this went a little bit long, but I thought there was some really important information we needed to get out. Until next week, this is Bill, AJB, saying 7-3, and thanks to my ex-whale Karen for her love and support. I hope to hear you in the pile-up. Have a great DX week.
The International Amateur Radio Union, marking 100 years of representing member countries around the world and coordinating frequencies and other concerns, the organization enters its second century with one big change on its mind: consolidation. Imagine for a moment an IARU without separate entities known as Region 1, Region 2, and Region 3. Imagine a total restructuring that would create a single global entity erasing the discrete regions separated by oceans, languages, and cultures. The International Amateur Radio Union has announced that it is considering just that and has released a proposal to unite the independent regions as one, combined with the International Secretariat to streamline decision-making, to better coordinate shared concerns, and to bolster membership in regions where it is declining. The IARU's administrative headquarters is presently based at the ARRL in the United States. The IARU has released guidance on potential restructuring to help the organization meet modern challenges. The proposed challenges would combine the 3 separate regional organizations into a single global entity. The proposal outlines a number of areas where the currently independent regional organizations struggle. Problem areas including declining membership, duplication of resources, lack of coordination, and other various inefficiencies. The changes are designed to establish a number of benefits: global representation, streamlined decision-making, better allocation of resources, improved communication, long-term sustainability, centralized finances, and greater influence. Member societies will vote on the restructuring with the potential for a transition as early as next year. This overwhelming change would not happen overnight, of course. The IARU will be asking member societies to vote after they have received the consultation on restructuring, which is available on the IARU website. Any changes that are approved would not take place before next year. The full consultation and restructuring PDF is available on the International Amateur Radio Union website.
The FCC has announced that the Office of Management and Budget has approved for 3 years the information collection requirement of the Commission's March 29th report and order that spelled out amateur radio service rules for the 2 new U.S. bands, 630 meters and 2200 meters. Notice of the action is now in the Federal Register. Before using either band, stations must notify the Utilities Technology Council that they plan to do so, and if UTC does not respond within 30 days, they may then commence operation.
The 2025 ARRL Field Day is 5 short weeks away on June 28th and 29th. The theme of Radio Connects highlights how radio ties our world together, bridging distances near and far, connecting people of all ages and walks of life through a shared interest in wireless technology, and providing a hands-on pathway for future technology leaders to experiment with radio as part of science, technology, engineering, and mathematics curricula. ARRL has made it easy for radio clubs to make in-person connections during the event. In addition to the resources available for promoting activations that are available on the Field Day website at www.arrl.org/Field Day, there is a site locator tool. Clubs can list their activations, and those looking to attend a Field Day site can find one in their area. ARRL Public Relations and Outreach Manager Sierra Harrop, Whiskey 5 Delta X-Ray, says the locator tool is important for bringing people together. ARRL Field Day is a great opportunity to gather. Not only will members of the public be able to visit with radio amateurs about our hobby, but many not-so-active hams use the event as a chance to get on the air, said Harrop. The site locator is key for making those connections. With a little more than a month to go until the big weekend, there were 538 sites listed on the locator. To search for a site near you, just go to the map and zoom in on your area. Click on the red map pins for details about each site. To add information to the locator, click on Add a Station. ARRL Field Day is the most popular on-the-air event held annually in North America. More than 31,000 hams participate each year. Connect with others who are preparing for the event in the official ARRL Field Day Annual Event Facebook group.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
Foundations of Amateur Radio. Around the world are thousands of associations, groups of people, clubs, if you like, that represent radio amateurs. Some of those associations are anointed with a special status, that of member society or peak body, which allows them to represent their country with their own governments, and on the international stage to the ITU, the International Telecommunications Union, through a global organisation, the IARU, the International Amateur Radio Union. Some of these are known across our whole community: the ARRL in the USA, the RSGB in the UK, and the WIA in Australia. Some much less so: the CRAC, the Chinese Radio Amateurs Club, or the ARSI, the Amateur Radio Society of India, for example. In an attempt to get a deeper understanding of what distinguishes these organisations, I visited a dozen member society websites. Cultural sensibilities and aesthetics aside, the variety and sense of priority is both pleasing and astounding. Starting close to home, the WIA, the Wireless Institute of Australia, shows news as the most important, and the top story is a radio contact between the International Space Station and a school held about 2 weeks ago. The ERAU, the Estonian Radio Amateurs Association, features an article about the 2025 General Meeting, outlining who was there, what was discussed, and thanking the participants for their contributions. When I visited, the ARRL, the American Radio Relay League, top news item was the renewed defense of the 902 to 928 MHz amateur radio band from a few days ago. The most important issue for the ARRL is that you read the latest edition of QST magazine, but only if you're a member. The RSGB, the Radio Society of Great Britain, has an odd landing page that links to the main site, which features much of the same content. The latest news is Mental Health Awareness Week and encourages us to celebrate kindness in our community. The DARC, the German Amateur Radio Club, has a page full of announcements, and the top one was an article about current solar activity, including a coronal hole and various solar flares. The ERASD, the Egyptian Radio Amateur Society for Development, uses QSL.net as its main website. It features many images with text, presumably in Arabic, that unfortunately I was not able to translate. Curiously, the landing page features some English text that welcomes all interested to join. I confess that I love the juxtaposition between a Yaesu FT2000 transceiver and the images of Tutankhamun and the pyramids. The RAC, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, use their homepage to promote its purpose and features many pictures of their bi-monthly magazine, which you can only read if you're a member, which is where many of the homepage links seem to go. The RCA, the Radio Club of Argentina, is promoting the 2024-2025 Railway Marathon, including links to descriptions of what constitutes a railway activation, how to reserve your station, and upcoming and past activations. There's also a reminder to renew your license. The ARSI, the Amateur Radio Society of India, has a very sparse landing page showing their mission and not much else. Clicking around gives you lots of information about the history, activities, awards, and the like. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to find out how to become licensed in India. There's hardly any images. In contrast, the URA, the Union of Radio Amateurs of Andorra, lands you on a page with contact details and not much else. Clicking through the site gives you lots of pictures of happy people and maps. Lots of maps. The KARL, the Korean Amateur Radio League, features an announcement with a link to the 24th Amateur Radio Direction Finding from a week ago, but it requires a login to actually read it. The JARL, the Japan Amateur Radio League, features an announcement to a form you can complete to join the, quote, list of stations from which you do not wish to receive QSL cards, end quote. The NZART, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, features a big button to the latest news, and clicking on it shows the Jock White Field Day, which was held several months ago. I wasn't able to see the CRAC, the Chinese Radio Amateurs Club, since the page didn't load for me. The Wayback Machine, also known as archive.org, from a capture a few days ago, showed a news item announcing the intent to organise the first Class C amateur radio technical something. I say something because I cannot actually load the article and see what it has to say. The event was scheduled for a month ago. The announcement was from several months ago. Content aside, finding sites was interesting too. Mind you, there's plenty of member associations that don't have any web presence at all. Is that by choice or necessity? The IARU list of member societies conflicts with the list of national organisations shown on Wikipedia. The IARU has about 160 entries. I say about since the list isn't really formatted as much as it's congealed. Let's just say perhaps a table for tabular data might be a novel approach. Wikipedia is slightly better formatted. It lists 93 national organisations. As it happens, both include a link to the National Organisation for China. which is either the Chinese Radio Sports Association with apparently two different acronyms, either CRSAOA or CRSA, or if you believe the IARU as a source, it's the one I mentioned earlier, the CRAC. I don't know which one is right, but at least we can assume that the IARU page was updated formally rather than edited by someone on the internet. Regardless of which one is the real Chinese National Amateur Radio Organization, none of the websites loaded for me. Let's move on. It's interesting that several non-English sites like Korea, Japan and Germany feature a button that allows their site to be translated into English. What's even more interesting is that the English version of the site is not in any way the same content. In many cases, it appears to be information relevant to English visitors rather than a translation. One notable exception is Estonia, which allows a visitor to read their site in Estonian or English right out of the box. Unsurprisingly, the ARRL website has no buttons for Spanish, even though that represents about 13% of the USA population, let alone any other language. I'd encourage you to visit a few and see what you can learn about the other members of our community around the world. My visits leave me with questions. What do these organizations stand for? What do they do? Are they there for amateurs, for aspirant members, the general public, for regulators, for their members, for fundraising and advertising, or international visitors and tourism? It seems to me that looking at just a few of these organizations reveals a great many things about how they understand their own role and how they deliver service and just how much money they have to play with to make that happen. I'll leave you to ponder how effective they might be and what your role is in that endeavor. I'm Ono, Victor Kilo 6, Foxtrot Lima Alpha Bravo.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
The next few solar cycles could be even more intense. This due to the result of a little-known phenomenon called the Centennial Gleissberg cycle. Radio amateurs are familiar with the 11-year solar cycle, but for many, the Centennial cycle is a relatively unknown phenomenon. The Gleissberg cycle is a slower modulation, which suppresses sunspot numbers every 80 to 100 years. For the past 15 years, the sun has been near a low point in this cycle, but this is about to change. New research published in the journal Space Weather suggests that the Gleissberg cycle is waking up again. If this is true, solar cycles for the next 50 years could become increasingly intense.
Bruce Page, KK5DO, is here now with this week's AMSAT report. Bruce?
Thanks, John. Now that Hamvention is over, we hope you enjoyed visiting the ARRL booths and the AMSAT booths and all the others. This week, AMSAT has announced one of their new initiatives. We have been working on this for some time. As part of our way to reach out to youths, we have BuzzSat. We are going to be offering courses that will get our youth interested in space and satellites. The first course is Satellite Meteorology. Future courses will be Climate Change, Pollution Control, Wildlife and Natural Resources, Navigation, Satellite Design and Operation, Space Exploration Communications, Broadcasting, Military Operations, and more. You can view the first course at BuzzSat, that's BuzzSat.com. We hope you enjoy it and share it with others. This is Bruce Page, KK5DO. Back to you, John.
Thanks, Bruce, for that report.
It is time for this week's look at the Solar Weather and Propagation Forecast Report. Solar activity during the reporting period ranged from low to high. Region 4087 produced the strongest event of the period, an impulsive or 3 flare on May 14th at 0825 UTC near the northeast limb. The region also produced our 2 flares at 0325 and 1119 UTC. Finally, 3 R1 events were produced by the region on May 14th and 15th. Region 4086 also produced an R3 event, with a flare observed on May 13th at 1538 UTC. No proton events were observed at geosynchronous orbit. However, a weak enhancement, which peaked below the S1 threshold, was observed on May 13th following the R3 event from region 4086. Geomagnetic field activity was at quiet levels on May 12th and 13th. Late on May 16th, enhancements in solar wind parameters, associated with the onset of a positive polarity coronal hole high-speed stream, and possible influence from the southern periphery of the coronal mass ejection that left the Sun on May 12th, increased activity to active levels. So looking ahead, solar activity is expected to be at low levels, with a chance for R1 to R2 minor to moderate events, over the outlook period. No proton events are expected at geosynchronous orbit. The remainder of the outlook period is expected to be at normal to moderate levels. Geomagnetic field activity is likely to be elevated above quiet levels for most of the next 27 days due to multiple, recurrent, coronal hole features. Moderate conditions are likely on May 29th and June 13th, M conditions are likely on May 19th, May 28th, and June 14th, active conditions are likely on May 30th through June 1st, and again on June 10th. Unsettled levels are likely on May 20th through the 23rd, May 27th, June 2nd through the 7th, and June 11th through the 12th. Quiet conditions are expected for the few remaining days of the outlook period. So looking ahead, the 10.7 centimeter flux will be 120 on May 23rd through the 26th, 130 on May 27th, 135 on May 28th and 29th, and 140 on May 30th and 31st. The predicted sunspot numbers will be 144 on May 23rd and 24th, and 146 on May 25th. For more information concerning radio propagation, visit the ARRL Technical Information Service, read a quick guide to HF propagation using solar indices, and check out the propagation page of Karl Lewetzelschwab, K9LA. For customizable propagation charts, visit the VOCAP Online for Ham Radio website.
Just ahead in radio sport, May 24th through the 25th, the CQ Worldwide WPX Contest, that's CW. May 26th, the QRP ARCI Hoot Owl Sprint, that's CW. May 27th, the QCX Challenge, CW Phone and Digital. And May 28th, the Phone Weekly Test, that is Phone. Remember to visit the ARRL contest calendar for more events and information. Upcoming section, state, and division conventions, May 30th through June 1st, CPAC hosting the ARRO Northwestern Division Convention, that's in Seaside, Oregon. On June 8th, the Breeze Shooters Hamfest hosting the ARRL Western Pennsylvania Section Convention in Butler, Pennsylvania. And on June 21st, the Knoxville Hamfest hosting the ARRL Tennessee State Convention in Knoxville, Tennessee. And this reminder, ARRL headquarters will be closed on Memorial Day, Monday, May 26th. There will be no W1AW code practice or bulletin transmissions on Memorial Day. ARRL headquarters will reopen Tuesday, May 27th at 8 a.m. Eastern Time.
October seems like a long way off, but the planners of the 43rd Annual AMSAT Space Symposium and Annual General Meeting, it's just around the corner. Organizers have already sent out a save-the-date notice for the weekend of October 16th and have published a general schedule that runs for 4 days. Meetings and presentations will be hosted at the Holiday Inn and Suites, Phoenix Airport North in Arizona, convenient to Phoenix Sky Harbor Airport. The Board of Directors will meet on Thursday, the 16th of October, and again on Friday, the 17th of October, the same day that the symposium presentations will begin. The annual general meeting will be on Saturday, the 18th of October. The morning of Sunday, the 19th of October, the closing day, has been set aside for the members' breakfast. More specific details will be made public as soon as they become available.
3 new members were inducted into the Amateur Radio Contest Hall of Fame on May 17th, 2025 during Hamvention weekend. Pat Barkley, N9RV, has been an active CW contester and station builder since getting his first license as WN8YVR in Michigan in 1967. John Lanny III, KB4BAI, was first licensed as KN4BAI in November 1954 at the age of 12, and Yuli Weiss, DJ2YA, was playing around with crystal detectors when he was only 10 years old. You can read more about these 3 new inductees at arrl.org. The Amateur Radio Contesting Hall of Fame is currently managed by the Worldwide Radio Operators Foundation in memory of CQ publisher Dick Ross, K2MGA.
Using the Baofeng Radio is a new book from John Leonardelli, VE3 IPS, published by the ARRL. It provides detailed information on the settings screens for several popular Baofeng radios. It also includes a cheat sheet with the most frequently used settings and helpful tips. Leonardelli is a longtime Baofeng user and enthusiast, and his own book gives readers everything they need to start using their handheld ham radio on the air legally, safely, and effectively. The book details operating with the popular UV5R, the rugged UV82, and the DMR-enabled DR1801UV. Using the Baofeng radio covers how to program and use these radios with only the front panel and built-in settings. It then elaborates on using the free programming software Chirp to provide memory channels using a laptop or home computer. Finally, it describes how to program the radio to communicate around the world using digital mobile radio, which may be accessed through repeaters or mobile hotspots.
Pieces of an antenna once atop New York City's Empire State Building have found a new home, and the auction held for them has done a lot of good. You might say that this was one high-profile antenna that got great reception. The remaining 16 elements of the Empire State Building's 32-element Alford antenna attracted lively and profitable bidding at a charity benefit auction in April. According to a report on the Radio World website, a total of $7,500 was raised for the Society of Broadcast Engineers, the Ennis Scholarship Fund. The antenna, which was installed on the Manhattan skyscraper in 1965, was decommissioned in 2019. At one time, it served as many as 16 FM broadcast stations simultaneously. The individual elements weigh about 100 pounds, or 45 kilograms each, but thanks to this successful auction, they'll carry even more weight in helping support the careers of future broadcast engineers.
We pause for stations along the network to identify. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, available as a stream to your favorite digital device on Spotify, TuneIn.com, Overcast, iHeartMedia, and wherever you download your podcasts.
A longtime pirate radio operator in South Florida has agreed to stop broadcasting and pay an $11,000 penalty to the FCC's Enforcement Bureau through a 20-year consent decree. Wilfred Solomon was found to be operating Radio Ideal, an unlicensed FM station in and around Broward County, Florida, targeting the Haitian community. Miami field office agents visited locations in the county from which Solomon broadcast in 2017, 2018, and 2023. Solomon agreed to a penalty of $11,000 paid in $500 monthly installments. He'll face an additional penalty of approximately $350,000 if he violates the decree during the 20-year consent period by committing another pirate radio offense or missing a payment. On 3 separate dates in 2023, the Commission found that Solomon operated the station on 87.9 FM from a location on Northwest 21st Street in Lauderdale Lakes. Its signal exceeded Part 15 limits. The Commission issued Solomon a notice of apparent liability in 2024 regarding the operation. The NAL proposed a forfeiture of approximately $350,000. Based on Solomon's history, the Commission decided that the proposed penalty deemed an upward adjustment. Prior to the 2020 passage of the Pirate Act, the maximum penalty for pirate operations was $151,000. According to the Commission's account, Radio Ideal also operated on 107.1 FM. In 2017, agents visited the properties in Oakland Park and Lauderhill, from which the station broadcast, and issued Solomon a notice of unauthorized operation. U.S. Marshals and officers from the Lauderhill Police Department seized radio equipment at the address Radio Ideal operated from in October of 2018, but the signal returned to the airwaves from Lauderdale Lakes and was observed by agents 5 years later. Solomon responded to the Commission's 2024 NAL, stating that he was unable to pay the proposed amount. Afterwards, a Bureau field agent determined that the station was no longer operating. Given Solomon's claim of financial hardship and that the station went off the air, the Commission determined a consent decree with a reduced penalty was appropriate. The Media Bureau will conclude its investigation as a result.
With the anniversary of the Gannon storm, the most powerful geomagnetic storm to hit the Earth in 2 decades, comes word that the U.S. government task force, established 11 years ago to handle space weather emergencies, has demonstrated that it is incapable of successfully managing such a crisis, according to a recent report task force members released earlier this month. Several critical failures came to light at the conclusion of a 2-day drill conducted in early May to assess U.S. agencies' readiness in such a crisis. The drill staged a simulated crisis of several CMEs hurtling toward Earth, creating widespread power and communications outages, radio blackouts, and radiation hazards for NASA astronauts on a lunar mission. This was the first exercise of its kind for the task force, which is known by the acronym SWARM, which stands for Space Weather Operations, Research, and Mitigation. Member agencies include the U.S. Department of Homeland Security and the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. According to the report, government agencies' protocols were shown to be weak and without effective inter-office coordination. Those challenges were called especially critical because warning for the impact of an incoming coronal mass ejection can be as long as a few days or as short as half an hour. The report praised the exercise for identifying these issues and called for, among other things, development of an advanced warning system and sophisticated space weather satellite systems.
Since it was founded in Florida in January 1972, Marlin P. Jones and Associates gained a loyal following among amateur radio operators looking for everything from power supplies to electronic switches and other components. The family-owned business closed its doors on the 9th of May and announced on its website that it would no longer be taking phone calls after the 23rd of the month. Its remaining inventory was purchased by another company in Florida, Skycraft Surplus. Positive reviews of the company's customer service and the quality of its products reflect the satisfaction that hams and other purchasers of electronic components received after doing business repeatedly with the company, which was also known as MPJ and Associates. The company's website gave no reasons for its closure. A statement simply says, "It has been an honor to have done business with you."
Soon, South Carolina will join other states as a hands-free driving state, with cell phone use banned altogether while driving. The South Carolina Hands-Free and Distracted Driving Act has been passed by the House and was signed on Monday by Governor Henry McMaster. The bill makes it illegal to use any mobile electronic device while driving. The law will take effect September 1st, 2025. But during the first 180 days after the law takes effect, officers will only issue warnings for violations. According to H. 3276, a mobile electronic device means a cell phone, portable computer, GPS receiver, electronic game, or any substantially similar standalone electronic device used to communicate, display, or record digital content. Of course, this does not include the use of citizens band radio, amateur radio, commercial two-way radio or its functional equivalent, subscription-based emergency communication device, or prescribed medical device. So everyone out there with a 9-foot antenna on their truck is still okay. Drivers will be prohibited from holding or supporting a mobile device with any part of the body. This does not prohibit the use of an earpiece or device worn on the wrist used for voice-based communication. Reading, writing, or sending any form of text, including but not limited to a text message, email, application interaction, or website information on a mobile electronic device is prohibited. Watching motion, including but not limited to a video, movie, game, or video call on a mobile electronic device. However, it is still legal to use your phone while legally parked or stopped, reporting an accident, emergency, or safety hazard to a public official, or performing official duties as a first responder. The bill states that drivers are also allowed to use their phone or electronic device for navigation, listening to audio-based content, or obtaining traffic or road condition information in a manner that doesn't require the driver to type. Penalties for not obeying the law will be a $100 fine for the first offense, then a $200 fine and 2 points assessed to the driver's license for a second offense within 3 years of the first offense. Also, officials say that you cannot be arrested for this summary offense unless you fail to appear in court. Meanwhile, a similar law takes effect on the 5th of June in Pennsylvania, where drivers will be banned from using handheld mobile devices while behind the wheel of a moving car. As with many distracted driving laws passed recently, this law also exempts amateur radio operators and emergency responders. The measure is known as Paul Miller's Law, bearing the name of the 21-year-old man struck and killed by a motorist distracted by a phone in 2010. And finally, in this story, a similar law in Iowa, also with a ham radio exemption, is set to take effect on the 1st of July, joining a growing number of states around the U.S.
2 days after the conclave of cardinals had elected Pope Leo XIV, amateur radio station HV5PUL, the Pontifical Lantern University, was on the air in Vatican City State in the heart of Rome celebrating. The station's administrator, Luca Della Giovampola, IW0DJB, reported that traffic was lively on 20 meters single sideband and 17 meters FT8. He said that the simple 100-watt station logged an estimated 400 contacts in 4 hours. Propagation was changing, and so, with the exception of one Japanese station, all the contacts were within Europe. It's not often a new pope is chosen, nor that HV5PUL is put on the air. Lucas said the call sign is active mainly on Saturdays in connection with special occasions, such as the opening day of the university's academic year and, of course, the election of a new pope.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available to download as a podcast from anywhere on the web podcasts are available.
Welcome to the 25th segment of Ham Radio History, a century of amateur radio. Ham's organizations, events, inventions. I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR. Our appreciation goes out to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us permission to use his website in the generation of these segments. Now, sit back, relax, and enjoy this, the next chapter of Ham Radio History. Freaks! The uneven, partly unpredictable nature of radio wave propagation continued to fascinate hams during and after the war. The solar cycle had peaked around 1917, just in time for hams to miss it because of the war shutdown. Now, with the next solar minimum little more than 2 years away, hams had just gone through the first winter season of primetime operating since the reopening, and had begun to notice some peculiarities and marked differences in signals from when they had last listened. In late December 1919, radio was blacked out again, but this time it was nature's doing, not a government edict. Strangely, the shorter wavelengths were dead despite the fact that 600-meter signals were still pounding in. No stations further than about 100 miles away could be heard. A QSD editor later wondered whether there could have been any connection with the cosmic disturbances in progress at the time. The idea was confirmed early the following year. Hams observed that a particularly severe radio blackout had immediately followed an intense and widespread auroral display. Both were evidently caused by a solar flare on 21 March 1920 and had brought message handling to a complete halt. While stations inside the daylight range were unaffected, no one further away could be heard, and the air was unusually quiet. Conditions gradually returned to normal after a day or so. There were also other oddities, too. Aside from the blackouts, hams sometimes experienced greatly increased static during the winter, the season when quiet was usually the norm, along with other erratic behavior of the operating weather. The League collected opinions and theories about the causes of these anomalies, no matter how unlikely. One amateur claimed to have heard signals fade away during a lunar eclipse. He asked, was it a coincidence, or was it the same effect some claimed to have heard when the planets were on the same side of the sun? But the QST editor endorsed a theory being proposed by many scientists that the main cause for the disruptions was sunspots. It was perhaps the first reference to the phenomenon in QST. ARRL Traffic Manager J.O. Smith asked whether the phenomena of natural signal variations were not really fading at all, but actually enhancement, since signals that could not be heard in daytime became detectable at night. He was right, but he also repeated a mistaken observation that signals were stronger on nights following a cloudy day than after a sunny day, and then disproved it by noting that the increase did not occur evenly or proportionally for all the stations and in all directions. Selective enhancement seemed to have a directional or distance dependence, with fading occurring more quickly or slowly according to where the far station was located. He concluded that this must be due to ground effects as well as atmospheric ones, and noted the existence of pockets where, if you were in one, you could work far away stations easier than intermediate distance ones. For example, New England to the Midwest compared with New England to New York City. He called for observations from amateurs so that these things could be studied collaboratively. Charles A. Lowry of Toronto wrote a 2-page letter on fading phenomena, also commonly referred to as freaks or swings. He had spent a long time monitoring 600 meters during the summer and fall of 1918 at a British naval station on the southeastern coast of Nova Scotia, specified as somewhere around 43 north, 65 west, which is actually off the coast. He reported several cases of fading he heard on signals coming from naval vessels and stations from a variety of locations, including the Midwestern U.S., the Caribbean, and places to his north. The strange variations usually began around 5 p.m. and changed in nature through the night, ending around 8 in the morning. To accompany his monitoring, he logged the weather at several locations, and in doing so disproved any connection or correlation to weather conditions. He also observed stations fading out completely at his location while simultaneously fading in at another. Thoroughly fascinated, he puzzled. How, I ask you, do NAJ SIGs miss Detroit, Cleveland, and Buffalo, and yet come in strong and clear at a station 1,500 miles from him and in a straight line over their heads? Striving to answer that question, Hams would lead the world into the unanticipated, unexplored landscape of the short waves. The League proposed that amateurs should make use of the upcoming summer months to collect data on so-called fading phenomena in a systematic, scientific way. Still viewing it as a problem rather than an indicator of new abilities, they would seek an explanation for it, hoping to find a remedy. For example, groups would use several receivers located at equal distance but in different directions from the transmitter, and then could detect directional effects on signal strength. Division managers could arrange a regular schedule of transmissions and collect reception reports. In fact, the radio section of the Bureau of Standards had requested the ARRL's help in a similar study, and arrangements were being made to accommodate. The League's capability for organizing, collecting, and analyzing reports in such a test far outclassed the Bureau's. The request of the Bureau constitutes another governmental recognition of the value of our ARRL, and we are proud and happy to be of service. Let us do our level best for them, wrote Warner. QSS was proposed as the new Q-signal abbreviation for fading phenomena. A month later, featuring a glamorous woman wearing headphones on its cover, QST carried the announcement of an ambitious set of QSS tests. By the way, the August Strays column later noted, the editor refuses to answer inquiries as to why the June QST had the cover it did. Stations across the country would transmit an arbitrary QST according to a schedule to be published in July. Anyone interested in participating could receive these transmissions and keep track of fading phenomena over time, then report their observations. The results would be analyzed by a group at ARRL, and as Warner explained, it is hoped and expected that valuable and intensely interesting information will be forthcoming. Thus is what the radio game most needs right now: reliable information on the subject. Attempts to correct it can have no chance unless based on a knowledge of the problem, and this we hope to develop. Just as there was hope for a cure of strays, static, surely freaks could be done away with too, through study, understanding, and ingenuity. A test plan came together that included a procedure to help standardize observations and reporting. Transmitting stations would send a complete alphabet 5 times at a speed of 18 words per minute. Receiving stations would then record the strength of the signals for each letter according to the well-known Eccles scale running from 0 to 9. Collaborating with the Bureau of Standards, the League developed a QSS test reporting form which members could replicate themselves. They were still so convinced that the phenomena had something to do with the weather that a section of the report form was devoted to recording the weather conditions in a standardized way. The huge analysis job would be divided up and handled by each of the 17 divisions in the League's operating department. Amateurs were instructed to send reports to their home division's fading committee, FC, or that of the division where the transmitter was located if different. Members responded with enthusiasm. The announcement generated the highest level of interest that editors of QST had ever seen for a cooperative operation. The tests would be done for the Bureau of Standards with participants chosen from among ARRL members because of their location. The ARRL also enlarged upon the idea and was arranging for similar tests in each division. Included in this material are quotes from the following: A Lesson, Editorial, QST, February 1920, page 17. Octothorpe, $, percentage sign, ampersand, star, asterisk, question mark, exclamation point, comma. Editorial, QST, May 1920, page 23. Eclipse Observations, Radio Communications by the Amateurs, QST, June 1920, page 51. J. O. Smith, Variations on Strength of Amateur Station Signals, QST, April 1920, page 17. Observations of Fading, Radio Communications by the Amateurs, QST, April 1920, page 47. Fighting Fading, Editorial, QST, May 1920, page 23. The ARRL, QSS Tests, June 1920, page 5. W. E. Eccles, On Measurement of Signal Strength, Proceedings of the IRE, June 1919, pages 267 to 268. With thanks to Chris Cadella, W2PA, for granting us permission to use his website's materials, Ham Radio History, A Century of Amateur Radio, Ham's Organizations, Events, Inventions, in the preparation of this segment, I'm Will Rogers, K5WLR, reporting for This Week in Amateur Radio.
You're listening to North America's premier amateur radio and technology news magazine of the air. We are This Week in Amateur Radio, distributed worldwide at twiar.net.
FCC Commissioner Jeffrey Starks used this Thursday's open meeting to officially announce his resignation, marking the end of a nearly 6-year tenure as the agency's senior Democratic member. The move officially opens a GOP majority under Chairman Brendan Carr, with Democrat Ana Gomez now the sole non-Republican. This has been the role and an honor of a lifetime, said Starks, reflecting on his service to the Commission, which began in 2019 following his nomination by President Donald Trump. Starks previously served in the FCC's Enforcement Bureau and held legal roles at the U.S. Department of Justice and in private practice. His resignation follows the earlier exit of former FCC Chairwoman Jessica Rosenworcel and comes as the Biden-appointed majority gives way to Republican-led commission. During Thursday's meeting, Starks emphasized that his work had always been about serving the public, not personal recognition. He praised FCC staff, colleagues, and partners across sectors for their collaborative efforts on issues ranging from consumer protection to national security and digital equity. Chairman Carr responded with praise for Stark's agency. "You leave behind an impressive legacy in public service," said Carr. Chairman Carr responded with praise for Stark's agency. "You leave behind an impressive legacy in public service," said Carr. "We were able to collaborate on a number of items and get some really good, significant wins for innovation, for competition, for opportunities." Stark was nominated by President Trump in June of 2018 to fill the FCC seat vacated by Tom Wheeler, unofficially succeeding Mignon Clyburn. Though praised across party lines, his confirmation was delayed by Senate Republicans and finalized in January 2019. Starks previously held roles in the FCC's Enforcement Bureau, the Justice Department, and on Capitol Hill. Meanwhile, Trump Commission nominee Olivia Trusty is awaiting a full vote after advancing through the Senate Commerce Committee. While she is expected to pass with ease, several Democrat senators warn they may withhold support on the Senate floor unless a corresponding Democratic nominee is also confirmed to maintain bipartisan balance. Starks has not announced the next step, but said a celebration of his time at the FCC will be held later.
Some hacks are so great that when you die, you receive the rare honor of both an obituary in the New York Times and an in memoriam article at Hackaday. The recently deceased Ed Smiley was a NASA engineer leading the effort to save the crew of Apollo 13 with a makeshift gas conduit made from plastic bags and duct tape back in the year 1970. Ed died recently, on April 21st, in Crossville, Tennessee, at the age of 95. This particular hack, another in the long and storied history of duct tape, literally required putting a square peg in a round hole. After an explosion on the Apollo 13 command module, the astronauts needed to escape on the Lunar Excursion module, but the lunar module was only designed to support 2 people, not 3. The problem was that there was only enough lithium hydroxide on board the lunar module to filter the air for 2 people. The astronauts could salvage lithium hydroxide canisters from the command module, but those canisters were square. Ed and his team famously designed the required adapter from a small inventory of materials available on the spacecraft. This celebrated story has been told many times, including in the 1995 film Apollo 13. Thank you, Ed, for one of the greatest hacks of all time. May you rest in peace.
The Deep Space Exploration Society, Kilo Zero, Papa Romeo Tango, recently held a community event to help foster engagement and educational outreach. Located in Colorado, the Deep Space Exploration Society is a nonprofit organization dedicated to practical astronomy and space science education for students, the general public, and society members. The club's major project is continuing restoration and operation of a 60-foot dish antenna for radio astronomy and amateur radio experimenting. On April 6, 2025, the Deep Space Exploration Society hosted an event that was specifically designed for educators and interested individuals from neighboring communities, organized by member Rob McMasters, Kilo Juliet, 7, India. 35 participants, including 16 adults, 11 children, and 8 DSES members, attended. Volunteers included Paul Saban, November Oscar 0 Tango, and Bill Thomas, Whiskey Tango 0 Delta X-Ray, operated the control console of the radio dish in preparation for an Earth-Moon-Earth communication demonstration. A last-minute equipment failure prevented the full demonstration, but a tour of the on-site underground amateur radio station featured a contact with a nuclear-powered ship located in Baltimore Harbor. The ship was calling as a special event station celebrating Marconi Day, and the radio contact with it showcased the capabilities of amateur radio. The Deep Space Exploration Society is looking ahead, and plans are in motion for future events aimed at further cultivating these valuable relationships with local participants and amateur radio.
The Digital Mobile Radio Project, launched recently by the Radio Society of Great Britain, is a way to provide opportunity and radio equipment for young new amateurs to become accustomed to making QSOs on a regular basis. The outreach team's new DMR kit contains DMR handheld transceivers and hotspots to borrow for as long as 3 months at no cost. Accompanying the equipment, of course, is the opportunity to use it, and the RSGB's team will also be hosting regularly scheduled youth nets to give as many participants as possible a good start. Licensed hams or school groups with at least one licensee are eligible to apply for the use of the kits. Meanwhile, the Society is also encouraging teachers to establish school clubs and become amateurs themselves. Funding for the Radio Communications Foundations will cover the cost of up to 9 teachers' exams. Additional details are available at rsgb.org.uk.
It is time once again for AMSAT's satellite shorts from all over. And we begin this week with an announcement from Germany's armed forces, who are planning to establish a large satellite constellation aiming to create an independent communications infrastructure similar to SpaceX's Starlink. The initiative, led by the Bundeswehr, envisions deploying hundreds of satellites to ensure secure and resilient military communications, with potential expansion into remote sensing and other applications. Germany has historically relied on satellite services provided by allies, but shifting geopolitical dynamics have prompted a re-evaluation of this dependence. The proposed Bundeswehr constellation is intended to ensure sovereignty and continuity in defensive operations, even in contested or degraded environments. It would operate separately from IRIS-2, the European Union's own sovereign satellite project aimed at providing broadband internet across the continent. The full article is available to read online. Next, the FAA granted environmental approval for up to 25 Starship launches a year at Starbase, a 5-fold increase from the previous limit. And also, due to budget cuts, NASA might scale back ISS operations, such as reducing crew size, extending crew missions, and halting upgrades to science instruments. And finally this week, China has granted scientists from 6 countries, including the United States, access to moon rocks collected by its Chang'e 5 mission in 2020. 2 NASA-funded U.S. institutions, Brown University and Stony Brook University, were selected to study the samples, despite long-standing restrictions on NASA's direct collaboration with China. The China National Space Administration called the samples a shared treasure for all humanity and emphasized its commitment to international cooperation. Experts noted that while U.S.-China space technology exchanges remain limited, lunar sample analysis poses no military concern and aligns with global scientific norms. The Chang'e 5 samples are of particular interest because they appear to be about 1 billion years younger than those collected during the Apollo missions. China National Space Administration officials stated they intend to maintain an active and open stance in global space collaboration through initiatives like the Belt and Road Space Information Corridor.
You are listening to North America's premier news and information service for the amateur radio hobbyist. We are This Week in Amateur Radio.
Chinese researchers have developed a compact, high-performance antenna that can seamlessly integrate into modern stealth aircraft, enabling efficient communications and navigation without compromising radar invisibility or aerodynamic performance. As stealth capabilities and aerodynamic performance become essential, modern combat aircraft are being designed with flatter profiles to minimize their radar signature and improve aerodynamic efficiency. Currently, antennas as small as 5 millimeters can be built into the surface of aircraft. However, these antennas typically operate within a narrow frequency range around 2.32.5 gigahertz. Researchers from the Southwest China Institute of Electronic Technology and the University of Electronic Science and Technology of China have now introduced an omnidirectional circular ring antenna that's both ultra-widebanded and low-profile profile. Their work's been published in the Journal of Electronic Science and Technology. We propose an airborne ultra-wide circular ring conformal array antenna based on the typical tightly coupled ultra-wideband long slot element and traditional multi-saturation methods of omnidirectional antennas, said Professor Feng Yang.
100 years ago, Radio Amateurs du Luxembourg was among the organizations representing radio amateurs from 23 nations at the founding of the International Amateur Radio Union in Paris, France. Celebrating the centenary and showing pride in Luxembourg's roles, Post Philately of Luxembourg has issued a postage stamp and a matching postal card marking the anniversary. The stamp will be released in the weeks ahead and will be available for purchase at the Radio Amateurs du Luxembourg booth at Ham Radio Friedrichshafen in June. Until then, pre-orders can be sent via email to dx@pt.lu.
In a community 60 miles east of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, the disaster has come to be known as the Great Flood of 1889. What began on May 31st of that year ultimately claimed more than 2,200 lives in the western part of the state. The deadliest dam burst in U.S. history followed several days of heavy rainfall, as more than 20 million tons of water rushed uncontrollably into the heavily populated valley. Johnstown in Cambria County had the misfortune to be just 14 miles downstream from the dam. It had 30,000 residents, many of whom were crushed by the sudden unexpected rush of floodwaters. This is history that is personal to many in the region, and amateur radio operators are no exception. They will be on the air starting on Saturday, the 24th of May, through to the 6th of June, operating from the Johnstown, Pennsylvania Flood Museum, calling CQ. They are using the call sign November 3 November and will be on HF and 2 meters. This special event is taking place in cooperation with the Cambria County, Pennsylvania Emergency Services and Skywarn Storm Spotters of Western Pennsylvania. Emergency responders know well tragic flooding revisited the region again in 1936 and 1977, but neither of those floods compared to this one, which is considered the kind of storm that happens once every 1,000 years.
Produced by amateurs, for amateurs, and originating from Albany, New York, you're listening to This Week in Amateur Radio.
The AMSAT Youth Initiative is pleased to introduce the first in its series of Satellites in Space Help Us Live a Better Life on Earth online courses. An introduction to satellite meteorology explores the many ways that NOAA satellites help meteorologists predict the immediate weather and long-term climate behavior to make our lives more enjoyable and safer. It is designed for students grades 8 through 12. Each chapter has 40 to 50 pages and is expected to take perhaps 30 minutes per chapter. If you leave the course, it will remember where you left off, so you won't have to start from scratch. The coursework is designed to let students progress through the material independently. The first installment is called An Introduction to Satellite Meteorology and will be followed by the next release in June. Future topics include wildlife and natural resources, navigation, climate change, and pollution control. The course is designed to be self-standing, so any student, parent, youth leader, or teacher can independently utilize the course. The courses are free. You can try this course at BuzzSat.com. Please note that the edition of the course is a beta release. Numerous improvements to the navigation features, clarity of graphics, and technical content are scheduled for the next release in 2025. But we'd love to hear from you. Please send your comments and suggestions to Frank Karnakis, AMSAT Vice President of Development at fkarnakis@amsat.org. Future courses to be added later this year include how satellites play a critical role in managing.
ARRL, the National Association for Amateur Radio, has published an 8-video series about the next generation of DXing. The all-day seminar was captured at the 76th International DX Convention held April 11th through the 13th, 2025 in Visalia, California. It featured expert panelists with deep knowledge of the current state of the art in the DXpedition world. The group of panelists covered everything from financing and planning of a DXpedition to getting permits, arranging logistics, planning out equipment, managing both remote and local operators, dealing with problems, and much more. The latest technology being used in DXpeditions was explained in detail, including the radio in a box, Starlink, software-defined radios, and the latest digital modes such as FT8 Superfox. The content is available on the ARRL HQ YouTube channel as a playlist. Session 1, Mission Planning, talks about planning a DXpedition. It is emceed by Ned Stearns, Alpha Alpha 7 Alpha, and features Don Greenbaum, November 1, Delta Golf, George Wallner, Alpha Alpha 7 Juliet Victory, and Bart Jenke, Whiskey 9 Juliet Juliet. Session 2, Search for Solutions, discusses hardware and process solutions. It is emceed by Don Greenbaum, November 1, Delta Golf, and features Adrian Supersa, Kilo Oscar 8, Sierra Charlie Alpha, Ned Stearns, Alpha Alpha 7 Alpha, and George Wallner, Alpha Alpha 7 Juliet Victory. Session 3, Team Building, goes into detail about how to build your team for a DXpedition. It is emceed by Glenn Johnson, Whiskey 0, Golf Juliet, and features Don Greenbaum, November 1, Delta Golf, Greg Marco, Whiskey 6, India Zulu Tango, and Adrian Supersa, Kilo Oscar 8, Sierra Charlie Alpha. Session 4, Data Networks for Ham Radio, covers the vital components of local networks and internet connectivity for activations. It is emceed by Ned Stearns, Alpha Alpha 7 Alpha, and features Bill Fenring, Whiskey 9, Kilo Kilo November, Kevin Rowlett, Kilo 6, Tango Delta, and Adrian Supersa, Kilo Oscar 8, Sierra Charlie Alpha. Session 5, Radio Systems Design, covers the RF hardware used in DXpeditions, including the rib and mother of all switches. The session is emceed by Kevin Rowlett, Kilo 6, Tango Delta, and features Bill Fenring, Whiskey 9, Kilo Kilo November, Greg Marco, Whiskey 6, India Zulu Tango, and George Wallner, Alpha Alpha 7 Juliet Victory. Session 6, Managing the User Experience, goes over how to make things work for your operators, both local and remote, and your DXers. Ned Stearns, Alpha Alpha 7 Alpha, leads this discussion featuring Jerry Hall, Whiskey 1, Victory Echo, Kevin Rowlett, Kilo 6, Tango Delta, and George Wallner, Alpha Alpha 7 Juliet Victory. Session 7, Station Integration and Test, shows you how to put it all together and, perhaps more importantly, how to test it, really test it, before the activation hits the air. It is emceed by Glenn Johnson, Whiskey 0, Golf Juliet, and features Jerry Hall, Whiskey 1, Victory Echo, Brian Warren, November 9, Alpha Delta Golf, and Ned Stearns, Alpha Alpha 7 Alpha. Session 8, Scheduling and Execution. It is all about getting it done. The best laid plans are worthless if they aren't executed. This video shows you how to make it all work. It is emceed by Don Greenbaum, November 1, Delta Golf, and features Glenn Johnson, Whiskey 0, Golf Juliet, Jerry Hall, Whiskey 1, Victory Echo, and Adrian Capersa, Kilo Oscar 8, Sierra Charlie Alpha. ARRL provided the video equipment and staff to record and produce the content, but it was created by the Thought Leader panelists.
You are listening to This Week in Amateur Radio, available as an on-demand stream from Spotify, Deezer, and wherever podcasts are available.
This Week in Amateur Radio is holding open auditions for news anchors for the weekly national worldwide amateur radio news service. If you have a good radio voice and can reliably read provided news copy, we are looking for you. This, of course, is an all-volunteer position. An amateur radio license is not required. You must have a high-quality microphone, headset mics are not used, and be familiar with audio editing software to record and edit your finished news stories before uploading. If you would like to try out for a weekly or bi-weekly anchor position with North America's premier amateur radio news on air and podcast, please send an email to our producer, George, W2XBS. You can include a sample MP3 of yourself reading news copy sent as an attachment to
W2XBS77 at gmail.com. That's whiskey, the number 2, X-ray Bravo Sierra 77 at gmail.com. Be sure and use Anchor Audition in the subject line. Please include your phone number and a good window of time for a callback to discuss your submission and our operating logistics to see if This Week in Amateur Radio is a good fit for you. We hope to hear from you soon.
And finally this week, a distress call that comes in via radio, but this wasn't exactly a local call or even a conventional DX call. How about a signal from 26,000 light-years from Earth? It's known as the snake, the nickname by which astronomers identify one dense, elongated filament in the center of our Milky Way galaxy. It apparently has suffered fractures in 2 places. As best as scientists can tell, a fast-rotating neutron star, a pulsar, collided with the snake at a not-too-shabby 12 million miles per hour and caused a fraction that disrupted the snake's magnetic field, releasing radio emissions from the site of the impact. Chandra X-ray Observatory and the Meerkat Radio Array in South Africa studied the snake, which is 230 light-years long, to get a better picture of what scientists compare to fractures in bones. Radio astronomers combined their findings with those of an observatory in Mexico and recently released a paper in the monthly notices of the London-based Royal Astronomical Society describing the event. Whether the snake can heal is another question altogether. Cosmic veterinarians don't make long-distance house calls. You can see images of the injury on the Chandra X-ray Observatory website.
This Week in Amateur Radio is heard on nets and repeaters around the country and around the world, on great repeater systems like WA3PBD repeater system, on Thursday evenings at 7:30 p.m. on 146.730 and 223.940, covering all of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and beyond. Many of the news and information items heard in this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio have been provided by the American Radio Relay League, the ARRL Audio News Service, and the ARRL Letter, AMSAT, the Radio Amateurs of Canada, the Shortwave Listening Post, the Federal Communications Commission, the Radio Society of Great Britain, and Ofcom, the South African Radio League, the International Amateur Radio Union, the Wireless Institute of Australia and the Australian Communications and Media Authority, the New Zealand Association of Radio Transmitters, the Amateur Radio Newsline, the Rain Hamcast, Eric Guth, 4Z1UG and QSO Today, QRZ.com, the International Telecommunications Union, the 425DX News, Parks on the Air, and the Soda Reflector, and various news sources on the Internet.
With special thanks to all our weekly news sources and to you, our listeners, that wraps up this edition of This Week in Amateur Radio. If you'd like to write to us, you can find everything you need, including archive editions of the news service, at our website at twiar.net. And now, for all of us at This Week in Amateur Radio headquarters and our news team around the world, this is Chris Perrine, KB2FAF, wishing you a 73.